Hello, all. Welcome to this episode of Leader's Voice. Now, the intention of this episode and of this series is basically to interview and amplify the voices of leaders who are very successful in their own field. At the same time, they believe in inner mastery. They believe in certain inner principles which lead them to achieve success. Success can come, but when success comes with balance, it is far more sustained, far more rooted, and the impact of that goes beyond just you, but to your team and to the entire ecosystem. Hi, I am Deepa, a life and a leadership coach, a leadership facilitator, and a self mastery expert. This series is so important for me because when I embarked on a journey of energy mastery and self mastery, I realized that the power that comes from rooting and then shooting is far more than just chasing success. And in this journey today, the guest I wanted to introduce to all of you is with me, Ashwini. Ashwini, welcome to this episode.
Thank you very much, Deepa.
So, to introduce her, Ashwini hails from Tamil Nadu, raised in Trichy, graduated as an engineer from Coimbatore, chose to step into the field of HR with an MBA from Bangalore. She journeyed with Bosch Limited for a decade, from a management trainee to supporting the HR shared services setup and stabilization to strategic HR business partnering to leading HR for a mid-sized factory, all in a matrix structure driven organization. She worked extensively with people and businesses on HR administration and excellence in various capacities. She worked with cross-functional and cross-location exposure spanning multiple business divisions in the automotive space. I've had the privilege to listen to stories from her stint there, and it inspired me, and that was one of the reasons that I invited her today in this episode. She fondly holds her role at Tirunelveli, where she was leading HR and CSR for the factory, as the best stint so far, as it paved the way for a highly immersive learning and serving experience amidst various personal and professional challenges. She has championed impactful change in length and breadth at multiple junctures in her personal and professional life, signifying both the inner and the outer world. She was keen to shift gears and move out to another organization for expansive learning and growth. However, she consciously chose to embark on a reflective and exploratory pause with a clear purpose in mind, looking to reposition herself personally and professionally. Fast forward to 1 year and a few months later, she had met her intended purpose with handful takeaways, tangible and intangible. Ashwini, in summary, is a seeker in life, a catalyst for change, a whisperer of spiritual growth, a leader who takes people along towards growth, an enabler of collective well-being and success, a believer of process and value chain focus, a champion of self-awareness and inner strength, a human, a being with insight and foresight. And I have the privilege, to have interacted with her very closely for the past 6 to 8 months. And each word I read out to me feels like truth. It's alive for me. And which is why it's so beautiful for me and for all of you to hear her stories. So now she's offering herself to the world as a conscious HR leader, a coach, a practitioner and facilitator of yoga as a way of life, a social change agent, and an ardent learner of life, living her truth in joy. She is now ready to take on HR projects. And I often tell her that for any employer who hires you is going to get the best words of the inner depth and outer success. Welcome, Ashwini, once again.
Thank you very much, Deepa. I'm glad to be here today.
I can't hear you very very
Can you
clear.
hear me now?
Yeah, I think towards the end, your voice fades away. Yeah. So, you know the intention of the series, Ashwini, and it is to celebrate the voices of people who believe in inner mastery. And my experience, even when I was in the corporate world, I actually never bothered of inner because the outer was so challenging, and there is a high one gets, with success and yet another success, next role, chasing those positions, solving tough challenges, etc. So, how did this realization and reflection come about that a break will help you to shift gears?
I would say for me, a break that I've taken now is a point of culmination for certain efforts and realizations that I have gone through in the past 7 to 8 years, I would say. Anybody in the previous organization you ask about, uh, for me, I would be probably called a workaholic who works at odd and long hours, but still delivers. That was always recognized. But then somewhere I didn't have a sense of balance. Although I was not the person who was emotionally turbulent, I was never turbulent, but I also did not have the inner balance. And I had four different role transitions in the span of 10 years. I was quickly moving to different roles. None of these roles that I had asked for, the organization had said, you have potential, why don't you try it out? They trusted me, and I jumped to every role and I performed in every role. But at some point, I wanted to pause and ask myself, this is how my first decade has panned out. How do I want my second decade to pan out? How do I carve out my purpose for myself so that now going forward, I define what I want for myself in my path and not just what the organization offers me. So that is what helped me decide on a pause before I move on to another organization. And I wanted to offer a renewed version of myself.
Yeah. I like the aspect of the pause, and I always say pause before you leap. And the image that always comes to me is like that archer who pulls back, and that pulling back process is to have that perfect bullseye shot. So that's really beautiful. So in the time, the one year and a couple of months that you have been an explorer, what have been the most interesting explorations that you have encountered?
I would say when I started my pause, I of course had a purpose, but I didn't have a plan on what to do, when to do, how to do, where to go. And another interesting factor is I didn't have a base throughout my break. I kept moving. There have been three different phases of exploration in my break, I would say. The first was literally traveling, spending time with people, meeting people from different walks of life, having different kind of experiential learnings for myself. Uh, that was the first phase. And the second phase, I also exposed myself to a little bit of consulting experience, which was also exploration for me. And then I dived into an intensive yoga teachers training course and a coaching immersive training by ICF, where both these channels really opened up my learning avenue. I've always had a quest for learning, very deep learning. And these explorations in my break have really opened up for me on what possibilities and opportunities could arise. And quite often I get asked in my break, so you are a coach now, you are a yoga practitioner and facilitator. So you can just do that. You can run a business with that. You don't have to get back to an organization. I said my purpose was not to make money out of this. That could be a secondary outcome. Primarily, these are elements that I'm building and integrating into who I am as a person. And how do I offer myself with these integrated elements to the organization or to whichever space I'm to serve? So I would say coaching and yoga have been very deep explorations that has paved my way the last 1 year.
And both of which could be very useful and immersive for those employees whom you are going to serve eventually. Yeah.
And as you say it, I quite often also get asked, so you can offer yoga sessions to an organization. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm intending to do. Yoga is a way of life as I see it, and not as a physical practice session to deal with stress uh, or wanting peace in a timely manner. That's not what it is limited to. How do I integrate my depth of yoga and learning into my workspace?
Yes, yes. So yeah, you mentioned that yoga is a way of being. So it was to nourish your being so that
Correct.
that being can shine in whatever you do. And that's the connection between the being and the doing. Yeah, that's beautiful. So you've been in the organization for 10 years and you have seen the hustle culture. It's going to continue maybe more or less. What are your views on the hustle culture and what could be some of the reasons that it's prevalent? Of course, you and I being a part of it in those years. And I was exactly like this, workaholic, and prided myself to be one.
I would say hustle per se to me in my definition is not wrong. But what do you hustle for? How do you define hustle for yourself? That matters. How does this hustle serve you? That's what I look at most. And in the workplace, I would say time is time. The dimension of time is fixed for everybody, but how do you own your time for yourself and then define your hustle for yourself makes all the difference. I'm very clear about calling time as ownership here and not control. I don't think we can control time, but taking ownership of your time paves way to define what your hustle is and make it work in such a way that life works in your favor.
Yeah. So let's say you are now going to get into a full-time role and you have all these practices that nourish your being. Do you ever worry how am I going to bring, sustain them when I join back work? Because when normally what I hear from people is rhythms are not for me because I don't have time. Normally that's what I hear. And you say own your time. Is it really practical, possible?
I would say it is definitely practical and possible when we set our priorities straight. This doesn't always mean my practices or my rhythms have to happen in a dedicated hour of my day. I can have certain non negotiables like my hygiene with my sleep, nutrition, fitness. Yes, I can carve out certain dedicated time, but how do I function in my being throughout the day? My practices allow me to function a certain way. So, how my thoughts pan out, how my emotions pan out, and how do I navigate through it? What is this narrative that I tell myself through the entire day on how I put myself into different circumstances? So, I feel we cannot really differentiate or separate out that this is the time for self care, this is the time to nourish yourself, and this is the time to work. It has to very seamlessly integrate.
Yes, yes. And this gets me to really reflecting on one of the reasons why corporate professionals are not able to sustain rhythms and routines. One of it being all or nothing. They want, a lot of times we'll want to give that 1 hour. If I can't give that 1 hour, then let me not just do anything. So it's a non starter. And I say it's a myth. Okay, so and on a Saturday and a Sunday, I can't do it because I'm so tired, working 5 days that I need to enjoy that leisure and pleasure of not doing anything. And so routines never get. And the other aspect that you're talking about, which is so interesting, is that all of these practices build the being, and that being is active in the doing throughout the day. So, the image is like it's like the color in everything I do, that color splashed. And it colors everything that you do in a positive way, not in a negative way, I meant. So this is a very beautiful perspective to look at routines and rituals. Have you always been Sticking to routines and rituals?
No, I've never been. I've never had consistency. I've been a Bharatanatyam dancer. I've been an adventure person. I've gone on treks. I've always been a very sporty person, but I've never had consistency earlier in life. Consistency I started building in the last 5 years. I started building. I was still not consistent enough. I'm consistent probably to a 70-80% now, which was a nothing earlier. And for me, what is key here is I learned to be okay when I was inconsistent,
Fantastic.
being okay with myself and not beating myself up for being inconsistent. As long as there was progress, I allowed myself to be inconsistent so that that can pave way for some learnings and then move forward to build more consistency.
Yeah. Yeah. Somewhere I feel like a similar story with me. I have never been consistent, and to me, consistency meant being bound. And for me, freedom was so important. So I don't want to be bound by anything. Fast forward today, if I'm not consistent with certain things, like my practices, like walking if I broke my leg and I couldn't do my run, etc., and that was consistent has been consistent over 2 years now. So I felt like a fish out of water, and I felt the quality of my thoughts, emotions, the calmness, the peace, the negative thoughts. The quality of my thoughts are really impacted by the rhythms that I pursue consistently. When I could see that connect, till now I was not seeing that connect. But when I could see the connect, that's when from inside I feel I want to live it.
And while you share that, what comes to my mind is it doesn't matter on how many days you miss doing what you have to do.
Yes.
When you can do it, give it your
Yes.
all. And that's going to save you on the days when you're not able to do it.
Very true, very true. And like today, I couldn't wake up for my workout in the morning. When I woke up, the workout was already over. My coach had finished. I messaged her. She sent me her workout video. I did it. I didn't waste a time in thinking, oh, I didn't get up this, that. I did it. 1 hour, I finished. And the joy of achieving it felt like achieving a project. And today I had 2 facilitations in the morning. And I knew that the quality of my thoughts and the effectiveness really depends on me doing that workout. I could see that connection right at the time I woke up. So I would do anything to finish it.
And you know
So,
what? These practices have given me something. When I spoke about how I function through my day, the being serves my doing. Any situation, I follow a very simple process to pause, process, reflect, and then act. I've done it so consciously earlier, now it has become so unconscious or subconscious. Unless something is really triggering, then I have to consciously do it. But otherwise, it's just wired into my system. Anything that happens, I just pause my outer world and I go within. And that
beautiful.
helps me process what's
Yes,
going on
yes,
in the moment and then
yes,
reflect about it as an observer, not as an
yes,
experiencer, but as an observer. It helps me then make decisions or choices on how to act going forward. And the root of all of this is coming from the practices that I do. Otherwise, it could be a very simple act of journaling. My day starts and ends with a journal, a specific format that I've set for myself. And when I started writing it, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Why do I write gratitude? Why do I write reflections of my day? Why do I write different things? But over a period of 1 to 2 years, I don't know how it has served me, but I really attribute some amount of credit to that practice, definitely.
yeah. This is so beautiful because you're saying that the shift is from being a blamer to an observer. From the and it's so true, when things don't work, the one who lives in the outer world will blame, and the one who lives in the inner world will observe and take charge. This is the key difference.
And this process, how did I arrive at this process? Was, I think only by 2015 and later is when I started noticing that I needed to attend to my inner balance. And around 2018, my inner was in soup, completely flipped. And the only thing I told myself is no matter what, I cannot let my inner collapse because that's the only control I have. That's the only place where I have ownership. That's the only place I can have a say over something. In my outer, I may seem like I have control. Truth is, I have zero control over anything. So it's helped me adapt a lot better and differently in the outer.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. What comes to also my mind is, in today's world, illnesses are on the rise. And my fundamental exploration, and forget the outer world, but more so with looking at my own illnesses, I realized I could attribute it to my own stress, my own thoughts and emotions, things I was not able to see, control, change, etc. And when I went on an inner journey, I could really shift the illnesses and shifted the way I look at illnesses. So for corporate professionals out there who either say that I'm not ill, I don't need to go for a checkup, etc., or they are with illness, there is illness in the body, but they say, okay, let me just stretch and finish this last. What do you have to say, Ashwini, especially being a yoga explorer and teacher? What's your thought?
I would say here, how do you recognize what an illness is in the first place? An illness or a consequence of well being starts in the inner first. What we often talk about is what is seen in the outer, and that's what we call as illnesses. It starts right from a thought could be a root to an illness. How we regulate our breath could be a root to certain illnesses. So it's very important to observe how grounded, how stable is our inner state of being in life. And the moment you recognize something is off, it's always a good practice to observe and take steps to understand what is this here to tell you and what you have to do about it. If there is a measure that you need to take, go ahead and take it. Do not wait until it reflects in your outer. The moment it reflects in the outer, it means it is not the starting stage, but it is a much further stage. And how we associate importance of priority to these stages, I think we'll have to redefine on how we see all of this. Every thought matters, every breath matters. How we move through the day matters, how we feel through the day matters, and how we talk to our own selves. I feel that's a very important inner narrative that plays a big role in well-being holistically. I often hear people, family and friends, anybody saying they would recognize something at a much later point in life, but they'll be baffled on what is the root to it. And they're not able to figure it out unless they go through a certain journey of exposing themselves to different modalities, working with probably a support person, a professional. And the root to all of that started sometime very, very early on. And the recognition happens only when we start seeing some sort of impact in the outer. So, to professionals, I would definitely say watch what's going on in your inner. Get comfortable to understand what your inner is and develop the strength to maintain that balance in the inner, which will automatically reflect in your outer life.
Yeah. And how we speak to ourselves is actually also a factor of how we have always spoken to ourselves and how primary caregivers have spoken to us right from childhood. So it's like a pattern we are living. How can we shift that pattern consciously, like you said?
I would say the practice that I do is notice. And like I said in 2018, when I recognized the only control I have is in the inner, the moment I feel off my center, away from my center of alignment, I first stop and say, I'm not going to point fingers at something else outside of me. If I am feeling something, if I have a thought, where is this coming from? I have to point my finger at me and not the outside. And that act of noticing has given me a lot of inputs first. Forget about dealing with it. It gave me a lot of inputs. And I started digging up a lot of things. I started observing myself a lot. When I had good data points about myself, it helped me understand and rewire certain patterns and beliefs in me. And with time, when I consciously keep doing it over a period of time, shifting my perspective or shifting my lens becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Even if something is very new, something that's thrown at me, I may get shaky at that point in time, but the second nature always comes back and serves me well.
It seems like you have installed many practices over time very consciously, because I hear you say that inner was the only thing you realized was in your control, and that's the only thing you could start with. And after those practices consciously you engaged in, they have now become a way of life, like you say.
Yeah. And
So,
I would even call it practices only the last 2, 3 years, 3, 4 years. Initially, I had no clue. I had no clue who to go to, who to ask help for, and what to read, what to watch, what experience should I put myself into. But I just said one day at a time and kept moving. One thing led me to another. And now when I look back, I can definitely call it practices.
yeah. So, what some of the other practices? I heard journaling, I saw her had conscious reflection and shifting perspective. I heard. What are some of the other practices? Of course, yoga.
Yoga, I would say yoga, journaling, and uh, more of inner work through different modalities. When I say inner work, it doesn't only limit to meditation or something where you just sit in silence, but different modalities. I have put myself through sensorial experiences which enable to understand what my senses, different senses are doing to me.
Lovely.
I've I have visited a farm 2, 3 times in the past few years around Coimbatore, where I've lived there to understand what sustainable living means. So it doesn't have to be a practice that I do every day, but how do I build my understanding around what serves me?
Yeah.
It's mostly been a self-inquiry, I would say. That's how it all started.
And pretty holistic. I hear the Panchakosha way
Yeah,
of
so that's how I focus. For me, the layers of my mind, body, and soul is very, very important to address. And all the practices that I've built for myself today addresses these layers.
yes, yes. Very much. That's what I hear. No wonder we are so connected.
And how I recognized this was especially after my yoga course, where people generally say the feeling that you get, the joy that you get after a workout. For me, I started experiencing joy through the process of my practice. I do a 1.5 to 2 hours practice sometimes. I was filled with joy through the practice, which is very new to me. You only enjoy the physical benefits and the high that you get after the practice. But the moment I started enjoying the process of it, I loved staying in a posture for 10 minutes, and which was very new to me.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. So we're coming to the end of this conversation. And if you had one piece of advice to share with leaders, corporate professionals, or anyone who's listening to this series who wants to begin or sustain their inner mastery journey for sustained outer success, what would that be?
I would say fix your hygiene factors first, which is whatever you consume and whatever your panchakoshas needs, the layers of your mind, body, and soul, sleep, your nutrition, kind of thoughts that you have, what you read, what you watch, whom do you connect with, what kind of environment are you living in. These are hygiene factors. This is a basic something that everybody can fix. The moment we fix this with consistency, a lot of things would fall in place in the inner. And the moment you start strengthening your inner, when you know more of who you are and the depths of you, I think it becomes very simpler to understand other people around. Build compassion, be inclusive of the community around you. And when this happens, I think functioning as a leader is a very second nature and comes very naturally to people. So practices need not be forced on you. Build your understanding around who you are, what works for you, and what serves for you. Do something what serves for you, and don't do something which is counterproductive.
Yeah.
That's what I would leave. And I would leave the last thing as skills definitely matter, not just in the outer, but the inner skills as well.
Yes.
It has to integrate.
Yes. And outer versus inner skills, do you have any ratio of how much time it takes to build outer skills and inner skills?
I would say it depends on each person's strength and the will to do it for themselves. A change or transformation can happen in 1 second or 1 day, or it can take 10 years. It depends how ready am I as a person to invite that change in.
Lovely. Wishing you all the best to, transform the workspace that you go to, and may you be able to really implement all that you have gathered and gained so far, and light up that ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Deepa. This was a lovely conversation to have.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much. Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope all of you who are watching really enjoy this series.